The gym went dead silent. Not the kind of quiet that happens between rounds. The kind that happens when everyone in the room realizes they've been watching something wrong. Bryson Kane, 24 years old, 210 pounds of sponsored ego, was on his back, tapping the mat. Hard, fast, like a man trying to put out a fire with his hand. The man standing over him? A 36-year-old janitor in a faded gray t-shirt. A single dad who cleaned these mats for free membership. Nobody knew his name 20 minutes ago. Now nobody could look away. If you're new here, subscribe right now and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button, because what happens next? Nobody saw it coming. The smell hit you first. Rubber and sweat, and something underneath both. The particular sharpness of bodies that had been pushing past their limits for years inside a space that didn't have enough windows. Stone Harbor Fight Club occupied the upper floor of a converted warehouse on the industrial edge of town, above a tire shop that closed at 5 and a bail bondsman that never seemed to close at all. The elevator hadn't worked since the previous winter. You took the stairs, and by the time you reached the top, your calves already knew you were there to work. It wasn't a pretty gym. The heavy bags were taped in 3 places each. The mirrors along the east wall had a long diagonal crack running through the center that Warren Pike had been meaning to replace for 2 years. The mats were blue once. Now they were closer to the color of old denim, scuffed pale in the middle where fighters circled and darkened at the edges where nobody ever quite reached. There were promotional posters on the wall from local cards, most of them yellowed at the corners. A whiteboard near the office door tracked the current members' attendance streaks in Warren's cramped handwriting. It was the kind of gym that smelled like work because that was all it was. Work. Cole Maddox liked it for exactly that reason. He arrived at 6:15 on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, always a few minutes before the floor filled up. He signed in at the front desk, same clipboard, same blue pen that Warren kept clipped to the board, nodded at whoever was working the desk, and walked to the far corner of the main floor where the older heavy bag hung by a chain that creaked slightly when the bag swung. He didn't claim the bag. He just always arrived first, and nobody had ever contested it, maybe because nobody else seemed to want that particular corner. It was too far from the mirrors. Cole didn't use mirrors. He wrapped his hands without looking at them. Left hand first, looping the fabric between each finger with the mechanical precision of a man who had done it so many times that his hands knew the sequence the way a pianist knows a scale. No conscious instruction required. He pulled the Velcro tight, flexed, adjusted the seam across his knuckle, then the right. Then he pulled on the same pair of gloves he'd been using for 3 years. 16 ounces, black leather, the right glove worn slightly more at the palm where he'd broken too many falls to count in his 20s. He warmed up slowly. He always warmed up slowly, the way older engines needed time before they ran clean. Shoulder rolls, hip rotations. He moved through a sequence of joint mobility work that looked almost meditative, nothing sharp or performative about it, just a body reacquainting itself with its own mechanics. If anyone watched, and occasionally the newer members did, they saw a lean man in his mid-30s with close-cropped dark hair going slightly silver at the temples, moving through warm-up exercises with quiet economy. He didn't look like much. That was fine. Cole had spent most of his adult life not looking like much to people who didn't know better, and he'd long since decided that was an advantage rather than a problem. He hit the bag for 20 minutes before the evening crowd started filling in around 7. Warren Pike had run Stone Harbor Fight Club for 11 years. He was 61, thick through the chest and shoulders, with the kind of hands that told a story without words. Knuckles that had healed wrong from old fractures, a scar along the left index finger from a spar that went badly in 1989. He'd competed in his 30s in regional circuits, never made it to anything that would get him on television, but he'd been good enough for long enough to understand what real training looked like versus what people performed when they wanted to look like they trained. He'd noticed Cole Maddox about 3 weeks after the man first walked in. Not because Cole was flashy. The opposite. It was the stillness that caught Warren's attention first. Most people who came into a gym carried an energy about them. Excitement, anxiety, the particular social electricity of a new environment where they wanted to establish something about themselves quickly. Even experienced fighters did it. There was always some negotiation happening, some invisible broadcasting of resume. Cole walked in and the frequency was just quiet. He worked hard, never complained, never asked for attention, and he had a quality of movement that Warren couldn't quite put language to at first. Not speed, exactly. More like absence of waste. Every adjustment economical, every step placed rather than taken. It reminded Warren of something he couldn't immediately name, something he'd seen a long time ago in someone else, but the memory stayed just out of reach. Cole paid his monthly membership in cash, folded in an envelope that he left at the front desk with his name written on the outside. When Warren offered him the work trade arrangement, a few hours of equipment maintenance and mat cleaning in exchange for the membership fee, Cole had accepted without hesitation and without apparent pride. He showed up on maintenance nights the same way he showed up to train, quietly, on time. He did what needed doing and didn't make conversation about it. Warren didn't know Cole's history. Cole hadn't offered any, and Warren had learned in 11 years of running a gym that the people who didn't volunteer their backstory usually had the most significant ones. You learned to wait. Bryson Kane arrived at Stone Harbor Fight Club the same way he arrived everywhere, loudly, before he was actually present. You heard his car first, some German machine that cost more than Warren made in a year, with an exhaust note tuned specifically to be noticed. Then the door at the bottom of the stairs opened with more force than necessary. Then his voice, already mid-conversation with whoever had the bad fortune of arriving at the same time, full of the particular ease of someone who had never once in his life worried about whether people wanted to hear what he was saying. He was 24 years old, and he looked like someone had taken the concept of physical fitness and made it a personality. 210 pounds, maybe 215, with the kind of definition that came from both genetic fortune and significant investment in both nutrition and time. He had a sponsorship from a local supplement company. Their logo was on his training shirt. And he maintained a social media presence that Warren had looked up once and immediately put down, not out of dislike exactly, more out of the mild vertigo of encountering a version of athletic culture that seemed to exist entirely for the camera. Bryson was good. That was the honest assessment. And Warren tried to stay honest even about people who gave him headaches. The kid had real athletic ability, real punching power, and he'd been training long enough to have actual skills underneath the performance. In a fair fight with a matched opponent, Bryson Kane could do damage. The problem wasn't the talent, it was what he did with it. The gym's newer members learned it within a week or two. Bryson didn't spar. He hunted. He had a habit of identifying whoever was struggling most in a given session and finding a way to end up paired with them. And when that happened, the session stopped being training and started being something else. He never hurt anyone seriously. He was smart enough to understand liability, Warren figured. But he had a particular gift for humiliation, for making someone feel small in front of other people, for landing a shot and then looking around the room to see if anyone caught it, a look that translated clearly as, "You see that? You all see that." Warren had spoken to him twice. Bryson had listened politely, agreed that the gym was a place for development, smiled his easy smile, and then 6 days later done it again to a 20-year-old kid named Marcus who was working up the nerve to enter his first amateur bout. Marcus hadn't come back. Warren was considering what to do about that. The Tuesday it changed started ordinary. Cole arrived at 6:15, signed in, wrapped his hands, took his corner. The bag creaked on its chain when he started working. He found his rhythm in about 4 minutes. Jab, cross, roll, check, kick, reset. He wasn't throwing anything near full power yet, just mapping the session, letting his body temperature climb, and his joints find their tolerance for the evening. By 7, the room had filled. 10 members on the floor, maybe 12. The sparring pairs started forming around 7:20, and Bryson was there by 7:15, already warmed up and already scanning the floor for whatever this evening's theater would be. Cole registered this the way he registered most things in a room, peripherally, without directing his attention. The same way you monitor a door you're not looking at. The one Bryson settled on tonight was a heavy-set man in his early 30s named Gary. Gary had been coming for about 6 weeks, still in that phase where everything he knew about fighting was being systematically disassembled and rebuilt from the ground up. He was earnest in the way that took courage, a man who knew he looked awkward and kept showing up anyway. Cole respected that without ever having said so. He watched from his corner as Bryson guided Gary toward the center mat with a hand on the shoulder and an expression of generosity that fooled exactly nobody who'd been in the gym longer than a month. The sparring started. It took about 90 seconds. Bryson picked apart Gary's guard with the professional ease of a man who could do it in his sleep, which he basically could. He wasn't throwing hard. That wasn't the point. The point was the commentary. The little pullbacks that left Gary exposed and then didn't capitalize. The way Bryson would stop and gesture, "Here, see this," like he was teaching. Except the lesson was structured entirely around Gary being the illustration of what not to do. The laughter was controlled, came out as just the edge of a smile, but it was there. Gary's face went red. Not from exertion. Warren was across the room talking to a member and hadn't seen it start. Cole had. He kept hitting the bag, jab, cross, roll. But he was watching Gary's feet now, watching the way the man's posture collapsed slightly with each exchange, the way his eyes started going down toward the mat when Bryson pulled back for another setup. That particular inward fold, Cole knew that shape. He'd seen it before in circumstances that had nothing to do with the gym. The body's way of trying to make itself smaller before someone diminished it again. Gary caught a clean counter, not hard but clean, right on the ear, and his headgear twisted. He grabbed it to straighten it, and Bryson used that moment to glance around the floor. His eyes landed on Cole. Cole didn't react. That was probably what started it. Most people, when Bryson looked at them during a session, gave him something back. A nod of acknowledgement, a look away, some small social negotiation. Cole just kept working the bag. Same rhythm, jab, cross, roll. The bag swung and the chain creaked and Cole's breathing was controlled and completely indifferent. Bryson told Gary to take a water break, set it the way you dismiss someone, not the way you give them permission to rest. And he walked across the floor toward Cole's corner. He stopped about 6 feet away and watched Cole work. Cole acknowledged him with nothing. "Yo," Bryson said. Cole hit the bag twice more, then let it settle. "Hey." His voice was even. I wasn't being rude and he wasn't being warm, he was just responding, the way you respond to someone saying your name in a grocery store aisle. "You've been on that bag for a while," Bryson said. He had a way of making observations that somehow bent them into criticisms, a particular inflection that turned information into judgment. "Every time I see you here, you're on that bag." "Yep," Cole said. "You ever spar?" "Not often." Bryson tilted his head slightly. He was studying Cole now, the way he studied all the new targets, looking for the thing that could be used. Cole's age was the first calculation that registered visibly on his face. His clothes next. The gray t-shirt had been washed enough times that the cotton had gone thin at the collar. His shorts were plain black, nothing branded. No logos, no tape-on-tape color coordination, no compression sleeves. "What do you do? For work?" Bryson asked. The question was genuine curiosity wrapped around something that wasn't curiosity at all. "Maintenance," Cole said. He nodded vaguely at the room. "Equipment. Nights." Bryson nodded like he was taking this in thoughtfully. "Nice," he said, and the word had enough lightness to it that it couldn't be directly challenged. Cole reached for his water bottle on the floor beside the bag. "Seems like a good fit," Bryson continued. "More of a support role." He gestured at the mats. "We need guys who keep things running, honestly." Cole straightened, took a drink. "Sure," he said. Bryson waited for something more. For discomfort, defensiveness, the small social flinch he'd learned to watch for, the thing that told him the hook had caught. Nothing came. Cole's face was the wrong kind of still, not suppressed, not clenching, just still. Like the question hadn't touched anything important. The thing about Bryson was that he was actually perceptive. He read people well enough to understand somewhere below the performance that when someone didn't react the expected way, it usually meant one of two things. They were either checked out entirely, or they were somewhere very far past the point where that kind of needle could reach them. He wasn't sure which this was, and that bothered him more than he would have admitted. He came back 10 minutes later. Gary had gone to clean up, and the floor was rotating through its next round of pairings. Bryson should have been working with his regular partner, a solid middleweight named Derek, who was actually at his level. Instead, he was back in Cole's corner. 3 other members were near enough to watch without being obvious about it. "Serious question," Bryson said. He crossed his arms, and the motion seemed calculated to the width of his chest. Not a hostile gesture, just a reminder of what was underneath the shirt. "How old are you?" 36. "You got kids?" A pause. Not a hesitant pause. A measuring one. "1," Cole said. Daughter. Single? Another pause. Something moved behind Cole's eyes. Very briefly. Widowed, he said, flat. Bryson absorbed that with the expression of someone who had gotten more than they intended and wasn't entirely sure what to do with it. Man, he said, respect. And then 2 beats later, not so far apart that it was a separate thought, close enough that it was still the same sentence in tone. She home with a sitter while Dad's here playing fighter? The room caught it. You could feel the air shift, that electrical moment when something is said that a second before seemed like it could go either way, and now clearly hasn't gone the good way. Cole set his water bottle down. He pulled his gloves off, one at a time, slowly. He set them on top of each other on the mat beside the bag. When he looked up, his expression had not changed. 3 minutes, he said. The gym paused. Not all at once, gradually, the way sound drops out when something starts that people want to hear. The speed bag stopped. The ropes went down. Conversations dried up mid-sentence. Even the music seemed to thin out, like the speakers knew something had shifted. Bryson smiled. It was the smile he used when he thought something was easy. You sure about that, old man? 3 minutes, Cole said again. Not louder. The same volume, which somehow made it worse. Warren Pike came out of his office. He'd heard the shift in the room without knowing yet what caused it, that particular change in frequency that every gym owner learns to identify the way sailors learn to read the color of the sky. He moved to the edge of the sparring area and folded his arms and watched. Cole walked to the center mat. He didn't bounce on his toes, didn't shake out his hands, didn't roll his neck with the kind of theatrical preparation that said, "Watch how ready I am." He stood with his feet at shoulder width and his weight settled, and his hands came up in a guard that was slightly different from anything you'd see in a boxing class or a YouTube tutorial. Higher than standard, tighter on the left, a very slight angle to his torso that wasn't quite textbook anything, but had the unmistakable quality of something that had been built, specifically, for something. Bryson moved to the center, rolled his shoulders, grinned at someone across the room. Warren said, "All right, 3 minutes, clean work." He hit the timer. Bryson came in fast. It was his move and he knew it. Close the distance early, establish the pressure, make the other guy react and respond, and stay in retreat mode. He'd built his whole sparring game around the gap between his speed and everyone else's comfort with it. He opened with a double jab to test the range and came over the top with a right hand that had real intent behind it. Cole moved left. Not backward. Left. The right hand found nothing. Bryson's momentum carried it through air, and Cole was somewhere his target-fixing mind hadn't quite put him yet. Cole reset before Bryson completed the thought. Bryson tried again. Another combination, jab, cross, left hook, the bread and butter, clean and fast. The kind of sequence that looked good on film. Cole slipped the jab with a head movement so small it was almost rude about it, made the cross go long by an inch of body rotation, and the hook caught air because Cole had already stepped inside its arc. Nothing landed. Bryson's brain registered this and went to the competitive file. Okay, he's slippery, adjust. He took a step back, changed his angle, tried to cut off the ring rather than chase. He was thinking in the language his training had given him. Control the space, control the pace. The problem was that Cole understood space in a way that had nothing to do with the gym. It had taken Cole years to understand this about himself. After he left the Navy and spent the first 18 months back in the civilian world feeling like he was operating in a different dimension than everyone around him. The thing the teams had burned into him wasn't technique, not primarily. It was spatial awareness at a level that most people simply did not possess. The ability to process the geometry of a room, a street, a doorway. The geometry of a body moving toward you, faster and more completely than the thinking mind could catch up with. You stopped thinking about where to be. You just were where you needed to be, because not being there meant something much worse than losing a round. He didn't think about slipping Bryson's punches. He was just already not where the punches were going. Bryson picked up the pace. He was good enough to know when something wasn't working and to change it, which was more than most fighters could say. He started mixing levels, throwing to the body, trying to bring Cole's guard down and open the head. He landed one shot, a right hook to the ribs, not light, and felt the contact and pushed the advantage. Cole absorbed it. Not stoically, not performing toughness. He just took the weight of it into his body the way you take a wave. rolled with the impact, neutralized it, and was already moving before Bryson could read the reaction. He pushed forward into Bryson's chest, clinched briefly, used the contact to feel where Bryson's weight was concentrated, and stepped back on the exit in a direction that forced Bryson to turn and reset. It was subtle enough that no one in the room could have articulated exactly what happened, but Bryson felt it. The unpleasant awareness that someone had just used him as a leverage point, that he'd given ground without deciding to, that his own momentum had been filed and redirected like a tool someone else was using. He kept going because that was who he was. He threw more, moved more, pushed harder. His breathing picked up. Not badly, he was fit, but there was a quality in it now that hadn't been there at the start. A note underneath it that wasn't exertion. It was the first tremor of something he hadn't expected to feel. 90 seconds in, he swung wide. A big right hand, too wide, born out of frustration and the unconscious desire to end this cleanly before it got worse. He'd done it before and it had worked because most people at this gym couldn't punish the mistake fast enough to matter. Cole caught the momentum at the wrist, barely a grab, more of a redirect, turned his hips, and for 1/2 second the geometry of the moment was completely clear to every person watching. Bryson's weight was traveling in a direction, and Cole was simply agreeing to help it along, adding to it rather than opposing it, taking the bigger man's own physics and multiplying them. Bryson hit the mat, not gently. The sound was the flat, resonant slap of 210 pounds of muscle, landing on vinyl without preparation. Before Bryson could process where the ceiling had come from, there was a knee across his hips, a hand controlling his near arm, and a weight settled across him that didn't feel large but felt, inexplicably and specifically, immovable. Cole's forearm was across Bryson's throat. Not crushing, presenting, the kind of precise placement that said, "I know where this goes." Bryson twisted. Cole adjusted without hurry. He tried to bridge, to roll, to use size. Cole read each attempt the way a river reads a rock, not by fighting the obstacle, but by understanding it completely and flowing around it. Bryson tapped. Hard. Fast. Cole released him immediately. Not after a beat, not with a look around the room to collect his moment. Immediately, the way you end a hold when the hold is over, because that was what you did. He stood. He didn't say anything, didn't look at anyone in particular, just stood there in the center of the mat, while the room stayed absolutely, completely, ringing silent. Bryson got up slow. His face had a quality Cole had seen before and always recognized, the expression of a man discovering, at speed, that the story he'd been telling himself about a situation was wrong. Not just wrong in the details, wrong in the premise. He stood. His chest was heaving. His eyes went to Cole, then away, then back. The room still wasn't making noise. Warren Pike was leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, and an expression Cole couldn't entirely read from this angle. Something between recognition and something older than that. Gary, the heavy-set man Bryson had been working over 20 minutes ago, was standing near the water station with his arms at his sides and his eyes wide open. Bryson found his voice. "What the—" He stopped, pulled in a breath. "Where did that—" Another stop. He was having trouble with complete sentences, which Cole understood. The body after a submission that it didn't see coming needed a moment to reorganize. Cole walked back to his corner. He picked up his gloves. He started unwrapping his right hand. "Hey." Bryson's voice had changed. The performance register was gone. What was left was something rawer, less composed. Not hostile, just stripped. Cole looked at him. "Where did you learn that?" Bryson said. The room leaned in. Cole finished unwrapping his right hand, started on the left. "Doesn't matter," he said. He folded the wrap over itself, tucked it, picked up his gloves and his water bottle, and walked toward the exit. At the door, without turning, "Good round." And then he was gone. The gym stayed quiet for another 15 seconds after the door closed. Warren Pike was the one who finally broke it, pushing off the wall and clapping his hands once. The gym equivalent of calling time. "All right," he said, "back to work." But he was watching the door Cole had walked through with that expression that still hadn't fully resolved, the one with something underneath it. A half-formed memory. A familiar shape in the movement of a man he'd just watched take apart someone half his age like it was a minor inconvenience. He went back into his office, sat down, and started making some calls. Across town, in a neighborhood of small houses, and wide sidewalks and yards with toys still scattered from the afternoon, a 9-year-old girl named Lucy Maddox sat at Mrs. Pereira's kitchen table doing long division by lamplight. She looked up at the clock above the stove. 7:58. He was never late. She went back to her math. The numbers swam slightly. She blinked them still. She wasn't worried. He always came. Outside Stone Harbor Fight Club, the German car sat in the parking lot. Inside it, Bryson Kane sat with his hands on the wheel and the engine off. He hadn't left yet. He was replaying 90 seconds that had rearranged something he didn't have a word for. He sat there for a long time. His phone lit up with a notification. Something from his social media, some metric going up, some number that was supposed to mean something. He stared at it without seeing it, put the phone face down on the passenger seat, and kept sitting. Warren Pike didn't sleep well that Tuesday night. He lay in the dark of his apartment 3 blocks from the gym and stared at the water stain on his ceiling that he'd been meaning to fix since the previous spring, and he thought about the way Cole Maddox moved. He kept coming back to it the way you come back to a word you can't quite remember. Circling, almost touching it, losing it again. There was something in the geometry of what he'd watched tonight that didn't fit the resume of a maintenance worker who trained recreationally. Something in the way Cole had settled his weight before the round started. The way his hands came up in that guard that wasn't quite any system Warren could name, but had the unmistakable grammar of someone trained to survive rather than to win. He got up at 2 in the morning and sat at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee he didn't really want and a notepad he didn't write anything on. The thing kept pulling at him. He'd seen it once before. Not in a gym. In a bar in Coronado, California, 1987, when Warren was 22 and doing his mandatory service, and a group of men had come in who were unremarkable in every visible way. Regular clothes, regular drinks, conversations you couldn't quite overhear, except for the way they occupied space. Not aggressively. Not like men trying to signal something. More like men for whom the ambient threat level of a bar full of drunk servicemen simply didn't register, the way background noise doesn't register once you've lived near a highway long enough. He'd asked the bartender about them. The bartender had said very quietly, "Don't." Warren had filed it and moved on with his life. And 34 years later, he was sitting in his kitchen at 2 in the morning, and the memory had come back, sharp and sudden, like a key finding its lock. He wrote one thing on the notepad. Then he closed it and went back to bed and didn't sleep for another hour. Cole pulled into Mrs. Pereira's driveway at 8:03, 5 minutes late, which for him was the rough equivalent of failing to show up entirely. He sat in the truck for exactly 2 seconds, doing the mental reset he'd developed over the years. The deliberate shift from whatever he'd been before walking through that door to what he needed to be inside it. It wasn't performance. It was more like switching frequencies. The things that lived in one register didn't belong in the other, and he'd learned early in Lucy's life that children were brutally accurate sensors for whatever an adult was carrying into a room, even when the adult thought they'd hidden it completely. Mrs. Pereira was a 67-year-old Portuguese woman who had been watching Lucy 3 evenings a week for 4 years, and who communicated her opinions of Cole's parenting primarily through food, the size of the container she sent home with them being in direct proportion to how well she felt he was doing. Tonight the container was medium. She handed it to him at the door with a look that was neither approving nor disapproving. "She did the math," Mrs. Pereira said. "The hard kind. Didn't complain." "Good," Cole said. "She asked me something." He waited. "She asked me if you were happy." Cole held the container. Something rearranged itself quietly behind his expression. "What did you tell her?" he said. "I told her you were very busy," Mrs. Pereira said, which was the answer of a woman who understood that the truth and the right thing to say were sometimes on opposite sides of a question. Lucy came to the door in her jacket, already zipped, backpack on, like she'd been ready for the last 10 minutes, which she probably had. She was 9, with her mother's dark eyes, and a way of looking at Cole when she thought he wasn't watching that, on his worst nights, undid him completely. "You were late," she said. Not an accusation, observation. 5 minutes, he said. "That's late for you." "I know." He held the truck door. "You eat?" Mrs. Pereira made soup. She climbed in. "The orange kind." "Good soup." "It's okay soup," she said in the tone of someone being diplomatically honest. He got in the driver's side and they drove the 8 blocks home through quiet streets, and she fell asleep against the window before they reached the third traffic light, the way she always did this late, dropping into sleep with the immediate totality of childhood that Cole had never quite been able to replicate in himself. Not since his 20s, not since long before Sarah got sick. He carried her in, took off her shoes, pulled the blanket up, stood in the doorway of her room for a moment that lasted longer than he meant it to. "Are you happy?" He went to the kitchen, put the soup in the fridge, stood at the counter and drank water from a glass and looked at the window above the sink, which was dark, which showed him a version of himself that he didn't spend a lot of time examining. He went to bed. He stared at the ceiling. He thought about the round. Not with pride. That wasn't the register it lived in. More the way you review a mechanism after you've used it, checking for wear, making sure all the parts still moved the way they were meant to. Everything had worked. He wasn't sure how he felt about that. Bryson came back Thursday. Cole noticed when he heard the car in the lot below, heard the familiar door and the stairs. He kept his eyes on the bag and kept his rhythm and waited to see what shape the evening would take. Bryson walked in without the entrance he usually made. He signed in at the front desk. He nodded at a few people. He went to his corner and warmed up, and if you didn't know what the room had looked like on Tuesday, you might not have noticed anything different. But the room had looked a certain way on Tuesday, and people remembered, and there was a quality to the attention Bryson received as he moved across the floor that was different from before. Still respectful, still social, but with something underneath it that had changed texture. Nobody said anything to Cole about it when he arrived. Gary was there, and Gary gave him a nod that meant something without requiring explanation. Two of the other regulars, a woman named Tess, who competed at welterweight, and a retired ironworker named Douglas, who trained purely for the sanity of it, both found reasons to work closer to Cole's corner than they usually did, which he understood as its own kind of acknowledgement. Cole wrapped his hands and started on the bag. He got about 12 minutes in before Bryson appeared at the edge of his space. Cole let the bag swing to rest. Bryson had his hands in the front pocket of his training hoodie. He stood like a man who had rehearsed what he wanted to say, and then gotten close enough to say it, and found that none of the rehearsed versions felt right anymore. "Can I work with you?" he said. The room didn't go quiet this time. The moment was too small for that, too private, tucked into a corner. But Cole registered the shift in Bryson's delivery. The performance layer was thinner. Not gone, but thinner. Cole studied him for a moment. "You want to train," Cole said. "Or you want to figure out what happened Tuesday?" Bryson's jaw tightened slightly. "Both," he said, which was probably the most honest thing Cole had heard him say. Cole glanced at the bag, then back. "5 minutes," Cole said. "Shadow box in front of me. I'll watch." Something moved across Bryson's face. The fraction of a second where his pride argued with his curiosity, and curiosity won, which told Cole something. He moved to the open space in front of the corner, started moving. His shadowboxing was good, genuinely good, the footwork clean, the combinations practiced to the point of fluency. Cole watched with his arms crossed and let it run for 3 minutes before he said anything. "Stop." Bryson stopped. "When you set up the right hand," Cole said, "your left shoulder drops first." Bryson frowned. "No, it doesn't." "Every time. A quarter inch? Maybe less? But it's there." Cole paused. "Tuesday, I saw it on your second combination. I knew the right hand was coming before your arm moved." Bryson stood there. He worked through this. "That's it?" he said. "That's how you read it?" "That's one of them," Cole said. Bryson looked at him differently then, not with the evaluating look of before, the one assessing weakness and opportunity, with something that took effort to produce and was therefore more interesting. "There's more?" he said. "There's always more," Cole said. He picked up his gloves and went back to the bag, and after a moment Bryson went back to his own work. And for the rest of that Thursday evening, neither of them said anything else, but the geometry of it had shifted, and both of them knew it. Warren called in a favor on Wednesday. He didn't like doing it. The debt was old, and he'd been carrying it carefully, the way you carry something fragile over uncertain ground. But the thing that had been pulling at him since Tuesday night had gotten louder, not quieter, and he'd learned to trust that particular noise. The favor was from a man named Denny Briggs, who had worked federal security contracts for 15 years before his knees gave out, and he retired to Stone Harbor to fish badly and drink decent bourbon, and occasionally, when asked, make a few calls to people he still knew in places he didn't officially know anyone. Warren met him at the diner on Clement Street at noon. Denny was 64, lean, with the permanent squint of a man who'd spent decades looking at things he wasn't supposed to be looking at. He had a cup of coffee and a piece of pie he wasn't eating, and the expression of someone who had already done what Warren was about to ask him about. "Cole Maddox," Denny said, before Warren had finished sitting down. Warren went still. "You looked already?" Warren said. "I looked when you texted me his name last night." Denny pushed the pie aside. "Took me 20 minutes to find him, and another hour before I hit the wall." "What wall?" "The kind that means he either did something bad enough to seal his own file," Denny said, "or something classified enough that my clearance doesn't reach it anymore." He picked up his coffee. "My guess is the second one. The architecture of what I did find doesn't read like a criminal file. It reads like a service file with most of the pages removed." Warren sat back. "Navy?" he said. Denny set his cup down. "The tail end of what I could confirm puts him at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, San Diego. Before that, there are training records at Great Lakes, then some transfers I can't follow, then a gap that lasts about 8 years where the paper trail goes very thin." 8 years. Warren thought about the bar in 1987. The men who didn't register threat as a concept. "Special warfare," Warren said. "That'd be my read," Denny said, "but I can't confirm. The 8 years are mostly dark. I found one overseas assignment, general theater, no specifics. One medal citation that's been partially redacted. And a separation date from active duty 11 years ago." Denny looked at him. "After that, he's a civilian, very quiet civilian. Works maintenance, pays his taxes, has a daughter in elementary school." "Wife?" "Deceased. 3 years after he separated." Denny's voice was careful and neutral in the way that meant he was being deliberate about it. "Cancer. 14 months from diagnosis." Warren looked out the window at the street. A woman was walking a dog that kept stopping to investigate something on the sidewalk. Ordinary world, going about its business. "You know you're looking?" Denny asked. "No," Warren said. Denny nodded. "Keep it that way," he said. "Those guys, if he's what the file suggests, they tend not to love being researched. And given what I saw of the gap years, that preference comes from experience." Warren picked up his coffee, put it down without drinking. "He's just training here," Warren said, partly to Denny and partly to himself. "Working nights to cover his membership. Picks up his kid every evening at 8. Denny looked at him for a moment. "Sounds about right," he said quietly. "Sounds exactly about right." The following Tuesday, Bryson showed up 40 minutes early. Cole was the only one on the floor when Bryson came through the door, and Cole registered his arrival with a glance and kept working. The bag, his corner, the creak of the chain. Bryson changed, came out, stood at the edge of the mat with his arms crossed. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said. "The shoulder thing." Cole let the bag swing. "And?" "I watched video, old training footage I had on my phone," he paused. "You're right, it's there. I didn't know I was doing it." Cole studied him. "That's the point," Cole said. "The tells you don't know about are the dangerous ones." Bryson processed this. Then, "Can I ask you something?" "You're going to anyway," Cole said. The corner of Bryson's mouth moved. Almost something. "The way you moved Tuesday," Bryson said. That's not from a gym. I've trained with guys who've been doing this for 15 years and none of them move like that." "What is that?" Silence. The bag swayed gently. Somewhere below, the tire shop was doing something loud with a pneumatic tool. "It's a long answer," Cole said. "I got 40 minutes before anyone else shows up." Cole looked at him for a moment with the particular assessment of a man deciding how much of something is worth giving and how much is worth keeping. It wasn't unfriendly. It wasn't warm either. It was precise. "It's not one thing," Cole said finally. "It's not a system or a style. It's what happens when movement stops being about winning and starts being about not dying." He paused. "Different motivation. Changes what you practice. Changes what becomes automatic." Bryson was quiet for a second. "Not dying," he said. "Context matters," Cole said. "The way you fight in here, the way you've been training, it's sport. Points and rounds and someone there to stop it when it goes wrong. Nothing wrong with that. But the motor patterns you're building are built around a certain set of rules. You follow me?" Yeah. When the rules change, Cole said, the patterns either adapt or they fail. Most of what I practiced for a long time was about what happens when the rules are gone. Bryson looked at the mat. Where? He said. Where did you? That's the part I don't talk about, Cole said, and his voice didn't harden, didn't become defensive, just became final, the way a door closes without slamming. Bryson accepted this in a way he wouldn't have accepted it 2 weeks ago. The version of him that had walked across the floor toward Gary with that smile would have treated it as a social challenge, something to crack for the entertainment of anyone watching. The version standing here now stood with his hands at his sides and nodded once, slowly, and said nothing more about it. Outside, a car pulled into the lot. One of the regulars, arriving early. The evening was starting. Show me the shoulder again, Bryson said. What to do about it? And Cole, after a moment, reached for his own gloves. Word moved through the gym the way it always moved through a gym, without being spoken directly, passed in the spaces between conversations, absorbed by the walls and re-emitted as atmosphere. By the end of the second week after the Tuesday round, the population of the floor had arranged itself differently. It was subtle, the kind of shift that didn't announce itself but would be obvious in retrospect. People who had orbited Bryson's energy, who had organized their training sessions around his moods and his approvals, began to find their own centers of gravity. The newer members stopped bracing when Bryson walked past them toward the sparring mat. Bryson noticed. He didn't say anything, which itself was different. A month ago, he would have found a way to reassert the room's attention, some performance of capability or wit that reminded everyone where the energy was supposed to point. He kept his head down. He trained. Gary came back on a Thursday. He came through the door with the look of a man expecting a bad outcome and preparing to absorb it with dignity, the look of someone who had talked himself into returning against the better advice of his own embarrassment. He signed in, changed, came out onto the floor, and went directly to the far bag, not Cole's corner, the opposite side of the room, and started working like he was trying to convince the bag of something. Cole watched him from across the floor without making it obvious. Bryson noticed Gary too. I was working combinations on the speed bag, and his rhythm broke for a second when Gary walked past, and Cole, watching both of them, saw the moment register on Bryson's face, that flash of something complicated passing through, guilt maybe, or something adjacent to it that was still finding its name. Bryson stopped the speed bag with his palm. He walked across the floor. He stopped a few feet from Gary. Gary stopped working and looked at him with the particular wariness of a man who'd been burned by an approach like this before. Hey, Bryson said. Gary waited. I was a dick to you, Bryson said. A few weeks ago. That wasn't... He stopped. Tried again. That wasn't training. That was me being a dick. Gary looked at him for a long moment. The rest of the floor hadn't gone quiet this time, but the people near enough had tilted their attention. Yeah, Gary said. Bryson's jaw moved. The word seemed to have a texture it wasn't supposed to have. I'm sorry. Gary studied him, deciding something. Okay, Gary said, finally. Not it's fine, not the easy social lubricant that made things smooth for the apologizer. Just okay. Which meant, I hear you, I'm not handing you anything for free. Bryson nodded. He went back to the speed bag. Gary went back to the heavy bag. The floor kept going. Cole had watched all of it from his corner. He didn't say anything, didn't nod at Bryson, didn't acknowledge it. He turned back to the bag and started again, jab, cross, roll, the chain creaking above him in its familiar rhythm. But something had changed. Not in Bryson's technique, not in anything that showed on film or could be pointed to. Something in the room itself, in the specific atmospheric pressure of the place, in the way 40-odd square meters of cracked mirror and worn blue mat felt when the people inside it were, however imperfectly and gradually, starting to organize around a different principle. Warren Pike stood in the doorway of his office. He'd seen it all. He looked at Cole's back, at the lean, deliberate motion of the man working the far corner bag, and the thing he'd been carrying since Wednesday morning, the thing Denny had told him at the diner on Clement Street, sat in his chest and didn't get lighter, exactly, but settled into a different shape. A man who could have walked into this gym and made everyone know exactly who he was, who had every credential to make a room bend toward him, had instead spent months cleaning the mats and wrapping his hands alone in a corner and leaving early to pick up his daughter. Warren watched him. The bag swung. The chain creaked. He went back into his office and sat down and looked at the notepad on his desk with the one thing he'd written on it Wednesday night. Who decided to be nothing. He sat there for a while. Then he picked up his pen, and he wrote down a number he hadn't dialed in a long time. The number Warren wrote down belonged to a man named Roy Castillo. Roy was 58, retired, lived up the coast in a town called Pelican Flats, where property was cheap and the fishing was decent, and nobody asked too many questions about what you used to do. He and Warren went back to the early 90s, when Warren was still competing on the regional circuit, and Roy was doing contract security work for reasons he described as complicated federal adjacent. They'd met at a card in Sacramento and stayed in loose contact the way men do when they respect each other enough to not need frequent proof of it. A call every year or two, sometimes less. Roy had spent 14 years working alongside special operations units in a support capacity that he'd never described precisely, and Warren had never pushed. What he had told Warren in a bar in Sacramento on the night they met, after enough bourbon to loosen the seams slightly, was that the operators he worked with were identifiable by one specific quality that had nothing to do with size or aggression. He'd said they were the quietest people in any room, not shy, not passive. Quiet the way a loaded weapon is quiet, not making noise because it didn't need to. Warren dialed. Roy picked up on the third ring. "Been a while," Roy said. "Yeah," Warren said. "I need to ask you something." "Okay." "There's a man training at my gym." Warren paused, organizing it. 36, ex-military. I had someone run a partial on him, service file with most of it pulled, 8-year gap that goes dark. Coronado in the training records. He stopped. "He moves like those men you told me about." A long silence on Roy's end. "Moves how exactly?" Roy said. Warren thought about how to answer that. He thought about 90 seconds on a Tuesday evening that the room still hadn't fully metabolized. "Like the space around him is information," Warren said. "Like he already knows where he's supposed to be before he needs to be there." Another silence, shorter this time. "The dark gap," Roy said. 8 years, you said. 8 years. Bud yes is 6 months. Then SEAL qualification training, another 6. Then a team assignment. Roy's voice had gone careful and methodical. If there are 8 dark years in between confirmed training records and separation, you're not looking at a guy who did 1 deployment and got out. You're looking at someone who was operational for most of that time. Rotations, real ones. Warren sat with that. "What kind of real?" he said. "The kind where the paperwork gets pulled," Roy said flatly. "The kind where you don't ask." A pause. "Warren, is this man a problem?" "No," Warren said. And then, because Roy deserved the full picture, "He's cleaning my mats to pay for his membership. He's got a 9-year-old daughter he picks up every night at 8. The silence this time lasted longer than the others. "Yeah," Roy said finally, quietly. "Yeah, that tracks." "It does?" "The ones who were in it deepest," Roy said. "They don't need the world to know. That need burns out. What's left is," he seemed to search for it, "simpler. They just want the simple thing, the kid, the routine, the thing that's real and small and theirs." He paused. "Don't look at him too hard, Warren. He knows when he's being looked at." Warren thanked him. Hung up. He sat in his office for a while with the phone face down on the desk and the number crossed off the notepad. Through the wall, he could hear the muffled percussion of the floor, the bags, the ropes, the scrape of feet on mat. Cole's corner bag was identifiable by the timing. That particular interval of jab-cross roll, the pause, the reset, the creak of the chain. Warren picked up his phone again, set it back down. He decided to do what Roy had told him to do. He left it alone. 3 weeks passed. They were ordinary weeks by the calendar, marked by nothing the outside world would record. Stone Harbor Fight Club held its Thursday evening open mat. The tile above the men's shower started leaking again. Warren ordered a new heavy bag to replace the one in the center row, whose chain coupling had been getting worse. Marcus, the 20-year-old who Bryson had driven out 2 months earlier, came back. Tentatively, standing in the doorway for a full 30 seconds before he committed to signing in, and when nobody made anything of his return, he went to the bag and started working like he'd never left. Cole noticed Marcus come in. He didn't acknowledge it overtly, didn't say anything. But on a Thursday, about a week after Marcus returned, Cole shifted his warm-up about 10 feet to the left, to the open mat space adjacent to where Marcus was working his footwork, and ran his own shadowbox session in Marcus's peripheral vision for about 20 minutes. No commentary, no instruction, just his movement, visible, close enough to be absorbed without being forced. Marcus's footwork got noticeably better over those 20 minutes in a way that the young man himself couldn't have articulated but felt. That ineffable experience of your body learning something from proximity rather than from being told. Cole went back to his corner. Bryson watched this happen. He watched it the way he'd been watching Cole do small things for 3 weeks. Not constantly, not with the starving attention of a student desperate for approval, but with the accumulated interest of someone who had started to understand that almost everything this man did was instructional and almost none of it was labeled as such. He'd started arriving early on Tuesdays. Cole never acknowledged this specifically. But on 2 of those Tuesdays, Cole had worked through a technique slowly enough and at a close enough distance that Bryson could map the mechanics, and that was enough. Oh. The night it broke open was a Friday. Fridays weren't part of Cole's regular schedule. He came in Tuesdays and Thursdays, maintained those nights, and occasional Saturday mornings when his neighbor could take Lucy for a few hours. Fridays he worked his longest maintenance shift, the building supply company. 3 miles east ran a full-night inventory rotation, and Cole covered the equipment repairs, which meant arriving at 10 and leaving before 6 in the morning. He was at the gym on that Friday only because Warren had called him in the afternoon about the new bag delivery. The supplier had dropped it early, unannounced, and Warren had nobody to help him hang it. The coupling required someone who understood load-bearing hardware, which Cole did, and Warren had learned not to attempt it alone after pulling a section of ceiling bracket down in 2019. Cole arrived at 6:30 with his tools in a canvas bag. He and Warren had the new bag hung and calibrated by 7:15. Warren offered him coffee from the machine in the office, which Cole took, and they stood in the empty gym. The evening session didn't start until 7:30, and drank it without saying much. "How's Lucy?" Warren asked. "Good," Cole said. "Doing a science project, something about soil composition." "She likes science?" "She likes being right about things," Cole said. "Science helps with that." Warren smiled into his coffee. He had a daughter of his own, grown, living in Portland now. He understood the particular quality of a parent talking about a child they were still discovering. "You're good with these guys," Warren said then, with the deliberate casualness of a man who'd been waiting for the right moment. Cole looked at him. "Which guys?" he said. "Marcus. Bryson. The way you—" Warren searched for the right description and settled on the honest one. "The way you move around them, without making it a thing." Cole drank his coffee. "I'm not coaching them," he said. "I know," Warren said. "That's what I mean." A silence. Somewhere in the building, something mechanical clicked and ran and clicked again. "I did some asking around," Warren said. He kept his eyes on his coffee, gave Cole the space of not being looked at directly. "Not much, He stopped. "I recognized something. I wanted to understand what I was looking at." The temperature in the room didn't change. Cole's expression didn't change. But something settled in him, some internal mechanism completing a calculation. And when he spoke, his voice was even and not hostile. "What did you find?" he said. "Not much," Warren said. "Honestly. File was mostly dark. 8 years of mostly dark." He looked up then. "Roy Castillo says hello, by the way. You probably don't know him." "I don't," Cole said. "He knows the territory," Warren said. "He told me to leave it alone." He paused. "I'm leaving it alone. I just want you to know what I know, so it's not a thing between us." Cole looked at him for a moment. Something passed through his eyes that wasn't anger and wasn't gratitude, and was some third thing that didn't have a common name. "Okay," Cole said. "Okay," Warren said. They finished their coffee. The floor needed checking before the evening session. Cole rinsed his cup in the office sink and put it upside down on the drying mat, and they went back out to the floor together without saying anything more about it. The 7:30 session started filling in. Cole had his tools in the canvas bag, and he was ready to leave when the door opened and everything changed. Yay! There were 3 of them. They came up the stairs at 7:41. Cole would clock it later because that was the way his mind worked and had worked for 15 years. Everything time-stamped. Everything filed. the habit of operational awareness that didn't turn off just because the context was a gym in a mid-tier coastal town on a Friday evening. The first one through the door was big, not gym big, the kind of mass that came from physical labor rather than barbells, thick through the neck and forearms, moving with the slightly forward-weighted gait of a man who defaulted to his own size as the first and last argument in most situations. He was maybe 30, wearing a jacket despite the warmth of the stairwell, and he had the specific expression of a man who had decided what was going to happen before he'd arrived. Behind him were two others, younger. One of them Cole made immediately as the one with the most actual capability. He moved right, automatically, as they entered the room, putting distance and angle between himself and his companions, which was either trained behavior or deep instinct, and Cole's red was the former. Military or close to it. Recent enough that the habits hadn't softened. The third was ordinary, carrying the kind of rigid nervousness that made people unpredictable. The room registered them the way rooms register something wrong. Not with alarm, not yet, but with that shift in frequency, that subtle retuning of attention. Warren came out of his office. The big one looked at him. "We're looking for Kane," he said. His voice was flat, not loud, the kind of flat that didn't need volume to convey the full weight of what it meant. Warren didn't move from the doorway. "Bryson Kane?" he said. "Yeah. He's a member here." He's here," the man said. Not a question. And he was. Bryson was on the near sparring mat, had been mid-combination with Derek when the three men came in, and now he was standing still with his headgear pushed up on his forehead and an expression that told Cole everything about the context that the stranger's arrival had only suggested. Bryson knew these men, and he did not want to see them. The big one walked toward him. "Outside," he said. Bryson's hands were still in his gloves. He didn't move. "Jimmy," he started. "I said outside, Bryson." The name landed in the room with history behind it. The way he said it, not a name, a word that meant you owe me something and I'm here to collect it, told Warren's floor that this was not a dispute that had started here and would not be finished here easily. Derek took a small step back. Instinct. Smart. The second man, the one who had moved right at the door, was now at an angle that covered the exit and covered most of the room. Cole had been tracking him since he came through the door and had not stopped. This one's eyes were moving the way Cole's eyes moved, logging dimensions and bodies and distance, and that told Cole with clinical certainty that whatever this was, it was not a social call that had gotten heated. "I need another week," Bryson said. His voice was working to be steady. "I've got the money. I just need—" "You said that last week," the big one said. "I know, but—" "And the week before." The room had stopped entirely. 12 people on the floor, all of them still, in the particular way people go still when they understand that the available choices are becoming fewer. Warren said, "You need to take this outside." The big one, Jimmy, turned his head toward Warren, slowly. The kind of slow that wasn't distraction, was deliberate, was a demonstration. "When I'm done," he said. Cole set his canvas tool bag down on the floor. He did it quietly. The bag made a small sound and settled, and nobody was looking at that corner of the room anyway. All the attention concentrated on the center of the floor, on Bryson with his gloves on and his borrowed time, and the specific look of a man discovering the exact dimensions of a hole he'd dug for himself. Cole moved. Not toward the confrontation. Not yet. He moved to his left, 3 steps, which took him to the edge of the mat and gave him a sightline that covered the second man and the door and the angle between them. He did this without hurry and without drama, the way you move a piece on a board before the other player has registered the shift. The second man's eyes found him. Held. Cole met his eyes and kept walking his 3 steps and stopped. They looked at each other for exactly 2 seconds. The second man's expression didn't change, but something behind it recalibrated, and Cole saw it, the specific micro-adjustment of a man who had just filed a piece of information and was deciding what it meant. His weight shifted. Barely, half an inch backward. Cole said nothing. Jimmy had Bryson by the front of the training shirt now. He'd crossed the distance while the room was processing everything else. The speed of a big man who knew how to use a moment of divided attention. And he had Bryson's collar and Bryson's feet were barely finding the mat. 12,000, Jimmy said. By Monday. I don't have... Monday. Warren moved from his doorway and said, "Let him go," with the voice of a man who had managed conflict in a gym for 11 years and was using every gram of that authority, and Jimmy looked at him with the polite indifference of a man who did not share Warren's assessment of the situation's power structure. "Old man," Jimmy said, "stay in your office." The third man, the nervous one, had drifted to Warren's left. Warren registered this and his jaw tightened. Cole looked at the geometry of the room. Jimmy and Bryson, center mat. The second man near the door, his attention split now between the room and Cole. The third man to Warren's left. 12 civilians on the floor in various states of frozen. The exit behind the second man, 40 feet and one bad angle away. He did the math in the way that was no longer math to him. It was just knowing, the way you know the temperature of water without measuring it, the way you know without looking that a step is there. He walked forward. Not fast. Not aggressive. The way water moves toward the lowest point. Not with violence, just with the absolute certainty of physics. "Hey," he said. One word, flat, not loud. Jimmy turned. Cole was 8 feet away, tool bag left behind, hands loose at his sides, standing in the center of the floor in a faded gray t-shirt and worn training shoes. And there was nothing about his posture that telegraphed anything. No squaring up, no display. Just a man standing in a room in the particular kind of stillness that the second man near the door had already registered and filed and reacted to by moving, slightly, further back. "He said he needs until Monday," Cole said. "Let go of his shirt." Jimmy looked at him the way men who operate on the currency of physical size look at men who don't appear to be offering the same denominations. He made a fast calculation. 6'2", 220 pounds, 20 years of getting what he wanted through his own body's argument, versus a lean 36-year-old who looked like he worked nights in a warehouse. The calculation came out wrong, as calculations based primarily on visible mass almost always did, when the other variable was experience of a kind that didn't show in a gray t-shirt. "Walk away," Jimmy said. Cole didn't. He stood there at 8 feet and said, "Last time." The room held its breath. Jimmy released Bryson's shirt and turned to face Cole fully, and that was the moment. That precise moment when his attention and weight and intention realigned toward a new axis. When the second man near the door made his move, pushing off the wall and angling toward Cole from the left. 3 fast steps, his hand coming up in a way that had purpose behind it, and everyone in the room saw it except the people whose attention was concentrated on Jimmy, and Cole was the only person in the room who had been watching for it. Cole dropped his shoulder and turned into the second man's angle rather than away from it, which was wrong by the logic of every instinct except the trained kind. And the second man's momentum met nothing where Cole's body had been, and met Cole's forearm, and then Cole's hip, and then the floor in a sequence that took less than 2 seconds and produced a sound like a dropped bag of sand. The second man was on the mat. He wasn't unconscious. He was still, in the way of a man whose body has just been informed by physics that it has reached the end of a particular line of reasoning. Jimmy looked at this. The room looked at this. Cole straightened. He looked at Jimmy. "Your call," he said. Jimmy was a man of real physical capability and real experience in the kind of conflicts that didn't follow gym rules, and somewhere in the infrastructure of that experience was a category, rare, encountered maybe twice in his adult life, for men who should not be pressed further. The category didn't have a name, but it had a feeling, and it was registering now, loud enough that Jimmy's body was making decisions before his pride could override them. He looked at the second man on the mat. The second man was getting up slowly. His expression had that quality Cole had seen on Bryson weeks ago. The recalibration, the taxonomy reshuffled. Jimmy looked back at Cole. "We'll be back Monday," he said to Bryson, without looking at Bryson. "Be somewhere else Monday," Cole said. Jimmy's jaw moved. Something worked behind his eyes. He gestured to the other two without a word. They moved toward the door. The second man picked up a water bottle he'd apparently set down without anyone noticing when they came in, and he looked at Cole once more before he went through the door, a long, flat look that was its own kind of communication, and then they were gone, and the stairs were loud, and then the door below, and then the parking lot, and then silence. The room stayed motionless for another 3 full seconds. Then Warren's shoulders came down. Then the air came back in. Bryson stood in the center of the mat with his gloves still on and his headgear still pushed up, and an expression that had cycled through about 6 emotional registers in the last 4 minutes, and had landed somewhere that Cole had seen before on younger men who had just understood something about the gap between what they thought a situation was and what it actually was. "Cole," Warren said. Cole was already moving back toward his canvas tool bag. He crouched, checked that the contents hadn't shifted, zipped it. "They'll be back," Warren said. "No," Cole said. He straightened. "You don't know that." Cole looked at him. He didn't say anything. He just looked at Warren with an expression of mild and patient certainty, the expression of a man offering a fact rather than an opinion, and Warren, who had spent the last several weeks assembling a picture of what this man was, held his breath for a moment and then slowly let it out. "Okay," Warren said. "I need to get Lucy," Cole said. He looked at his watch. 7:58. 2 minutes. He picked up the tool bag. He walked to the door. Bryson said, "Cole?" Cole stopped. Didn't turn immediately. Waited. "Who are you?" Bryson said. It wasn't rhetorical. It wasn't theatrical. It was the genuine question of a 24-year-old who had just watched something happen that rewrote a category he thought he understood, spoken in the voice of someone asking it for himself privately, regardless of who else was in the room to hear. Cole turned. He looked at Bryson for a moment. "Someone who needs to pick up his daughter," he said. He went through the door. The gym was quiet except for the creak of the new heavy bag, settling into its chain, finding its balance. Marcus was standing near the far wall. He looked at the door Cole had walked through, then at the mat where the second man had been on the floor 20 seconds ago, then at Bryson, then at Warren. Nobody said anything. Warren walked to the center of the floor. He looked at the mat. He looked at the door. He bent down and checked the vinyl where the second man had landed, the habit of an 11-year property owner checking for damage. There was none. He straightened. He looked around the room at 12 people who were waiting for him to tell them what they'd just seen. "All right," he said. He didn't offer more than that, because he didn't have more than that. He went back to his office and sat down and put his hands flat on the desk and stared at them for a long time. And outside the window, the parking lot was empty, and the ordinary Friday night sounds of Stone Harbor carried on, indifferent, unaware. The canvas tool bag was gone. Cole was gone. 3 blocks away and moving. 8:01, 2 minutes, right on time. Lucy was already at the door when he pulled up. She had her backpack on and her jacket half zipped and the expression of someone who had been watching the window for the last 10 minutes and was now performing the casual stance of someone who definitely had not been watching the window. Mrs. Pereira stood behind her in the doorway with the container, medium again, maybe slightly larger than last week, Cole noted, and the look of a woman who had registered something in his face the moment he came up the walk. "You're on time," Lucy said. 8:01, he said. "That's 1 minute late." "It's 1 minute late," he agreed. Mrs. Pereira handed him the container without comment. Her eyes stayed on his face a second longer than usual. "Beef stew," she said. "The real kind, not from a can." "Thank you, Elena," he said. She nodded, looked at him once more. Let it. In the truck, Lucy fell into her usual running account of the day. Something about a disagreement at lunch over whether a hot dog was a sandwich, which had apparently divided her 4th grade class into factions that had not been fully resolved by dismissal. And she wanted Cole's opinion, which he gave carefully and with full acknowledgement of the philosophical complexity involved, because she was 9 and she was serious about it, and she deserved serious engagement. He listened to her talk. He listened to her and he drove through the quiet streets, and the ordinary yellow light of the street lamps came through the windshield, and his hands were steady on the wheel, and somewhere underneath the conversation about sandwiches and the warmth of the truck cab and the smell of beef stew in a container on the back seat, he ran the replay of the last 40 minutes with the detached efficiency of a system doing its own diagnostic. The second man's move. The angle. The way Cole had turned into it rather than away. The floor. Jimmy's face when the calculation resolved wrong. The way the room had breathed when they left. All of it filed, all of it cataloged. He pulled into their street. "Dad," Lucy said. "Yeah." "Is everything okay?" He parked, cut the engine, looked at her. She was watching him with those eyes that were her mother's. The dark, direct ones that didn't ask questions for social reasons, only asked them when they actually wanted the answer. "Everything's fine," he said. "You went somewhere in your head," she said. "You do that sometimes." He looked at her for a moment. 9 years old. Honest in the way children are honest before the world teaches them that honesty is inconvenient. "I had a long day," he said. "Stew smells good." She accepted this. Not because she was satisfied with it, he knew. Because she'd learned the geography of what he'd answer and what he wouldn't, and she was smart enough to work with the terrain she had. They went inside. He heated the stew. She finished her homework at the kitchen table. He stood at the counter and ate standing up because he was tired, and sitting down sometimes felt like committing to staying still, which some nights his body resisted without his permission. He watched her work the long division. She erased something, wrote it again, erased it again. Her jaw set. 9 times 7, he said. "I know 9 times 7, she said without looking up. "Okay." "It's 63. "Yep." She wrote something. The pencil stopped moving. She looked at it. 63, she said quietly to herself. Then she wrote again. Cole finished his stew. He washed the bowl, put it on the drying mat, stood at the window above the sink for a moment, and looked at the dark yard and thought about Monday, and whether what he told Warren was right. He was reasonably sure it was right. He went to bed at 10. He slept without dreaming, which was no longer something he took for granted. Bryson called Warren the next morning. Warren was unlocking the gym at 8:15 Saturday, the early session crew already gathering on the sidewalk below. 4 regulars who came Saturdays specifically because it was quiet and nobody performed for each other before 9 in the morning. He had his keys in the lock and his phone buzzed, and he almost let it go to voicemail before he saw the name. He answered. "You all right?" Warren said. "Yeah."
Yeah, a pause. "No, I don't know." Another pause. "I need to talk to you." "Come in at 9. Floor will be running, but we can use the office." Silence for a moment on Bryson's end. Then, "Is Cole going to be there?" "Saturday's not his day," Warren said. "Why?" "Because I need to talk to you first," Bryson said, "before I talk to him. If I talk to him." Warren finished unlocking the door, pushed it open. The stairwell exhaled its familiar smell of rubber and old effort. 9 o'clock, he said. Bryson sat in Warren's office at 9:20, which was close enough to 9 that Warren didn't comment on it. He was in civilian clothes, jeans, a plain pullover, no branding, which Warren noted because Bryson in gym clothes always had a brand somewhere, a logo on his sleeve or chest, as natural to him as a second skin. This version looked younger, less assembled. He sat in the chair across from Warren's desk with his forearms on his knees and told him about Jimmy. It took about 15 minutes. The short version was that Bryson had borrowed money from a man named James Kowalski, Jimmy, 8 months ago. $12,000, personal loan, the kind that didn't involve banks or paperwork, and therefore carried its own interest structure, which had been explained to Bryson in general terms he'd understood, and specific terms he'd apparently been optimistic about. The money had gone into a business venture with 2 friends that had, within 4 months, become the particular shape of disaster that looks obvious in retrospect and invisible in the middle. The friends were gone. The money was gone. Jimmy wanted his $12,000 back plus what the contract, the handshake kind, stipulated for 6 months of non-payment, which was more than $12,000. Warren listened to all of this without his expression doing much. When Bryson finished, Warren said, "Is Kowalski connected to anyone?" Bryson looked at him. "What do you mean connected?" "I mean, does he have people?" Warren said. "People who do things for him." Bryson's silence answered it. "The man last night," Warren said. "The one who moved for Cole. That's not a bookie's enforcer. That's something else." "Jimmy does some work for some people," Bryson said carefully. "I didn't know how much until last night." He looked at the floor. "I thought it was just money." "I thought it was just a loan." "It's never just a loan," Warren said. "Not unkindly. The way you say something that's true and obvious and still worth saying because apparently it hadn't been obvious enough at the time." Bryson's jaw moved. "What happened last night?" he said. "What Cole did?" "I know what Cole did," Warren said. "That second guy." Bryson stopped. "Jimmy's guys don't go down like that. I've seen those guys, Warren. They don't—" He stopped again, searching for the right language and not finding a framework that fit. "How does someone do that?"
Warren sat back in his chair. He looked at Bryson for a moment. I'm going to tell you something, Warren said, and then I need you to understand that the telling of it ends here. It stays in this room. You don't carry it out. You don't use it to tell a story at someone's dinner table. You don't use it to explain Cole Maddox to yourself in a way that makes him into something. Are we clear? Bryson looked at him. Yeah. Yeah or yes, Warren said. Because there was a difference right now in this room with this particular information, and Bryson needed to understand that. Yes, Bryson said. Warren told him what Denny had found, what Roy had told him, what 8 dark years in a service file meant when the file had been built at Coronado and the gap followed confirmed SEAL training records. He didn't editorialize. He didn't dramatize. He gave Bryson the structure of it, the shape of it, without the specific details that Denny hadn't been able to access anyway. Bryson sat very still through all of it. When Warren finished, the office was quiet. On the other side of the wall, the Saturday session had picked up in volume. The ropes, the bags, someone's music bleeding through the drywall. He never said anything, Bryson said. No, Warren said. He's been cleaning mats, Bryson said, like he was still processing the architecture of the thing. Yes. Why? Bryson said. And it wasn't rhetorical, wasn't frustrated. It was the genuine question of a young man sitting with something he couldn't quite assemble into a shape that made sense. Warren was quiet for a moment. Some guys come back from that life and they need the world to know what they are, he said. They need it the way you used to need this room to see you. He paused. And some of them, the ones who were in it deepest, who paid the most for it, they just want to put it down. They want something that's theirs, that nobody can assign a meaning to except them. He looked at Bryson. Cole has a daughter. That's what he wants to be. That's all he wants to be. Bryson was quiet for a long time. Then, and last night someone threatened people in his space, Warren said. That's a different thing. Bryson sat back, ran a hand through his hair. He had the look of someone doing significant internal restructuring, the visible effort of a worldview making room for something it hadn't allocated space for. Jimmy's going to come back, Bryson said. Maybe not here, but the debt is still... That's your problem to solve, Warren said. Not harshly, but clearly. And you need to solve it. Not with Cole. Not by pulling him into something he didn't choose. You understand? Yes. Warren leaned forward. The money. Call your family, call a bank, call a lawyer, call whoever you need to call to get legitimate money in front of a legitimate problem. Because what you've got right now is the other kind, and it won't get better by sitting with it. He paused. Do you have people? Family? Bryson's expression moved. Something underneath the surface, something that had been packed away. My father, he said. We're not... He stopped. It's complicated. Uncomplicated, Warren said. Today. Cole came in Monday morning, not to train. He came in at 8 a.m., before the gym opened, with a box of hardware from the building supply store and the specific intention of fixing the bracket on the south wall that had been pulling from the stud for 3 weeks. He'd told Warren about it the previous Thursday, and Warren had ordered the parts, and Cole had said he'd handle it Saturday, but then Saturday had happened the way it had. He let himself in with the key Warren had given him for maintenance nights. The gym was empty, lit by the morning light coming through the high windows, gray and slanted and clean. He liked the gym at this hour. Without the bodies and the noise and the social weather of the evening sessions, it was just a room. Mats and bags and mirrors and the particular smell of years of effort absorbed into the walls. He set his box down and looked at the south wall bracket. Bad. Worse than he'd thought. The previous installation had used the wrong fastener for the load, and 3 years of a heavy bag's momentum had been working on the stud through an inadequate anchor. It was a wonder it had held this long. He started pulling the old hardware. He was 20 minutes into it, focused on the work, when he heard the stairs. His hands didn't stop. He tracked the footsteps by sound. One person, heavier on the right side, familiar cadence. Warren. Warren came through the door with 2 coffees and paper cups and stopped when he saw Cole already working. Figured you'd be here early, Warren said. Bad bracket, Cole said. Wrong fastener. Should have been a 3-inch structural screw. Warren handed him a coffee. Cole took it. They looked at the wall together. Bryson came in Saturday, Warren said. Cole drank his coffee. He told me about Kowalski, Warren said. The debt. The history of it. Cole set his coffee on the floor, picked up his drill. Not my business, he said. Might be, Warren said. If Kowalski decides Friday's interaction constitutes a problem he needs to address. Cole put the drill bit against the stud and squeezed the trigger. The sound filled the room for 3 seconds. He stopped, checked the depth. He won't, Cole said. You sound confident about that. The one who moved for me Friday, Cole said. He knew what I was before I touched him. He saw it when they came in the door. He pulled the drill back. Men like that don't push harder when they learn the information was wrong. They revise the plan. Warren considered this. And Kowalski? Kowalski listens to the man who moves for him, Cole said, because that's why he keeps him around. Warren looked at him. Cole was already fitting the new anchor, turning it by hand to find the stud, focused entirely on the wall. What about Bryson? Warren said. What about him? The debt is real, the $12,000. That's Bryson's problem, Cole said, which was the same thing Warren had told Bryson Saturday morning, and Warren recognized it and understood that they'd arrived at the same position from different directions. He's trying to call his father, Warren said. They don't talk much. Cole drove the first structural screw. The drill screamed for 2 seconds. He stopped, checked. Good. Okay, he said. He wanted to talk to you, Warren said. I told him to solve his own problem first. Cole drove the second screw, checked both. He pulled on the bracket. Good resistance, solid seat, no give. Good call, he said. Warren sat down on the bench along the near wall. He drank his coffee, watched Cole work. The morning light shifted slightly as a cloud moved outside, the room going briefly warmer, then cooler. I've been thinking about something, Warren said. Cole picked up the third screw. You've got classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, Warren said. I've got nothing on Wednesday and Friday mornings. Good time slot. I can never fill it because I can't find someone worth paying for it. He paused. I want to offer you those slots. Cole kept working. I'm not a coach, Cole said. What you did with Marcus last month, Warren said, moving next to him, letting him absorb the footwork without making it a lesson. That's better coaching than most coaches do. That's not coaching. It produced results, Warren said, which is the definition. Cole drove the third screw, checked the bracket. Good, solid, exactly what it should have been 3 years ago if someone had used the right hardware. I work nights, he said. Morning slots, Warren said, 8 to 10. You'd be done before Lucy's school day is halfway through. Cole stood back, looked at the wall. What would you pay? He said. Warren told him. Cole was quiet for a moment. I don't want a title, Cole said. No head coach, no assistant, no session instructor, Warren said. That's all. Cole looked at the bracket, at the bag hanging from it now, newly secure, hanging right. Let me think about it, he said. Warren stood. That's not a no, he said. No, Cole said. It's not a no. Warren picked up his coffee cup, moved toward the office, stopped at the door. The man Friday night, he said. The one who moved. What about him? Could he have hurt someone before you? Cole looked at him. Yes, he said, simply. Warren absorbed this. So you made a decision, Warren said. Not a question. I made an assessment, Cole said. The distinction, delivered quietly, was the most precise thing he'd said all morning. Not a decision, something faster than a decision, something that lived below the level of deliberation. Warren nodded slowly. He went into his office. Cole started packing his tools. Bryson called his father on Sunday at noon. He stood in his apartment, the expensive one, 3rd floor, City View, the apartment that was itself part of the financial logic that had led him to Jimmy Kowalski 8 months ago. And he dialed the number and waited through 3 rings with the specific discomfort of a man who had grown accustomed to being the loudest person in any room and was now preparing to be very small in front of someone who'd known him when small was all he was. His father, Gerald Kane, was 62 and had spent 30 years building a mid-sized construction company from the kind of nothing that was real nothing, not the romanticized kind, the kind where your shoes have holes and you do the math on groceries. He'd worked himself into the kind of success that left marks, bad knees, a shoulder that hadn't been right since 2004, a face that had the particular weathering of someone who'd spent decades outdoors making something from nothing. He and Bryson had been in a complicated holding pattern for 3 years, since Bryson had decided that what his father had built wasn't interesting enough, which was not what Bryson had said, but it was what Gerald had heard, and Gerald was a man who heard the real sentence behind the polite one. Gerald picked up on the third ring. Bryson. Dad. A pause. I need to talk to you. Silence. Gerald Kane did not fill silences socially. Okay, he said. Bryson told him. Not all of it. Not the gym, not Cole, not the way Friday night had looked from inside his own chest. But the money. The decision 8 months ago. The way it had gone wrong. The shape of what he owed, and to whom. Gerald listened without interrupting. When Bryson finished, Gerald said, How much? Not how could you or I told you or any of the things Bryson had spent 48 hours pre-defending himself against. Just how much? Bryson told him. The silence that followed was long enough to have weight. I'll transfer it today, Gerald said. Dad, don't, Gerald said. Not harshly, just with the finality of a man closing a door on a conversation he wasn't going to have right now. You'll pay me back, monthly, whatever you can manage. A pause. Get a lawyer to send Kowalski a letter when the money's received. Make it clean and formal. Paper trail. Okay, Bryson said. Another silence. This the same kind of thinking, Gerald said, that made you quit the apprenticeship? Bryson closed his eyes. Different kind of thinking, he said. Same result. Gerald was quiet for a moment. You training? He said. Yeah, Bryson said. I'm training. You still at that gym, Stone Harbor? Yeah. A pause. You behaving yourself there? The question landed in a strange way. Bryson opened his eyes and looked at the city view from his window, at the ordinary Monday of it, people and cars, and the flat gray of a sky that hadn't decided yet what it was doing. I'm working on it, he said. Gerald made a sound that wasn't quite anything specific. I'll send the money, he said. Call me next week. He hung up. Bryson stood there with the phone in his hand. He looked at the city view for a while, at the expensive apartment that was now going to be partially financed by his father's 30 years of bad knees and outdoor work and real nothing to start with. He sat down on the couch. He sat there for a long time without picking up his phone to check anything. I thought about Cole standing in the center of the gym floor in a faded gray t-shirt and the particular kind of stillness that didn't announce itself. He thought about the bracket on the wall and the bags and the cracked mirror and Warren's cramped handwriting on the attendance board. He thought about Gary's face when Bryson had said, I'm sorry, and Gary had said, okay, and nothing had been made easy by it, but something had been made possible. He thought about his father's voice saying how much without a single syllable of judgment in it. He thought about what Warren had told him Saturday morning in the office, about the men who'd been in it deepest and wanted to put it down, who wanted something small and theirs. He sat on his couch in his expensive apartment and felt the particular and unpleasant sensation of understanding something about himself that required no external voice to name. He'd been building a room his whole life and making everyone in it look at him. And there was a man across town who'd built nothing and taken nothing and demanded nothing from any room he walked into, who had more authority in his stillness than Bryson had manufactured in 2 years of performance. He sat with that. It didn't feel good. He let it not feel good. That, he was beginning to understand, might be the first real thing he'd done in a long time. Jimmy Kowalski called his man on Saturday afternoon. His man, Victor Reyes, who had moved right at the gym door on Friday, who had gone to the floor in under 2 seconds, who had gotten up and walked out and not said anything in the car on the drive back, had been quiet since Friday. That particular quiet that Jimmy had learned in 4 years of working with Victor meant something was being processed that wouldn't be shared until Victor had finished processing it. Victor picked up. The guy at the gym, Jimmy said. What about him? Victor said. Who was he? A pause. Nobody, Victor said. Victor? He's a maintenance worker, Victor said. He trains there. That's what he is. That's not what he moved like, Jimmy said. Silence. No, Victor said. It's not. So what do we do about it? Victor was quiet for a moment. Jimmy heard him breathe. In the 4 years they'd worked together, Victor had been the element that made Jimmy's work possible, the capability that turned a conversation into a certainty. Victor had not been turned into the floor in under 2 seconds since Jimmy had known him. Jimmy wasn't sure it had happened before in Victor's adult life. Not like that. Not that clean. Nothing, Victor said. Victor? We don't do anything about it, Victor said. His voice was flat and final in the way it got when he was not offering debate. If Kane pays the money, we close it. If he doesn't, we find a different kind of pressure that doesn't involve that gym. Because of one guy, because of what that guy is, Victor said, which is something I'm not interested in finding out more about than I already do. Jimmy sat with this. Victor didn't say things he didn't mean. Kane will pay, Jimmy said, testing. Then it's done, Victor said. Jimmy was quiet. Okay, he said. Victor hung up. He sat in his car in the parking lot of a hardware store 3 miles from his apartment. He sat there and turned his left wrist over and looked at it, at the specific spot where the pressure had been applied. Friday night, the leverage point, the joint angle that had taken him off his feet in a way that his body still hadn't entirely forgiven him for. Not because it hurt. It didn't, not badly. Because of what it told him. Because of what it had communicated in the fraction of a second it happened, wordlessly, in the language of force and geometry and experience. Victor had served 6 years in the Marine Corps. He'd been to places. He'd done things that didn't appear in his paperwork. He knew what trained looked like from the inside of being trained, and he knew the difference between someone who had trained in the way of competition and someone who had trained in the way of survival. The man in the gray t-shirt was the second kind. Victor had known it when they walked in the door. He'd moved anyway, because that was his job, and because he was good at his job, and because nothing in his life up to that point had given him serious cause to believe that his capability had a ceiling he needed to account for. He had accounted for it now. He started the car. He drove home. Some information once received changed the map permanently. He updated his. The money arrived in Kowalski's account on Tuesday morning. Gerald Kane had moved fast. The transfer cleared before 10 a.m. And Bryson's lawyer, a compact woman named Diane Faust, who worked out of an office above a dry cleaner on Merchant Street and who Bryson had found through Warren's referral, had a formal letter of satisfaction sitting in Kowalski's registered business email by 11. Clean, documented. The kind of paper trail that made further engagement unprofitable in every direction that mattered. Bryson texted Warren at 11:15. 2 words. It's done. Warren read it in his office and set his phone face down on the desk and sat there for a moment with the specific relief of a man who had been carrying a weight he hadn't agreed to carry and had just been allowed to put it down. He picked the phone back up. He texted Cole. Kane resolved his situation. Clean. Cole's reply came 4 minutes later. Good. That was the end of it. On that front, no ceremony, no debrief. The problem had existed, and now it didn't, and the people involved moved on in the way that people move on when they're not interested in making a story out of their own crises. Bryson came in that Tuesday evening with his sponsorship shirt on, which Warren noticed, but underneath the logo and the familiar clothes, something had shifted in the architecture of how he occupied the space. He signed in, changed, came to the floor, and went to work without scanning the room first. That scan, the automatic social inventory he'd been doing for 2 years every time he walked through the door, cataloging who was there and what their presence meant to him, wasn't there. Or it was there and it had changed its purpose, because his eyes moved through the room the way someone checks that everyone's okay, rather than the way someone checks that they're the most significant person in it. Cole was in his corner. Bryson went to the near bag, warmed up. 40 minutes into the session, during the open rotation, he came across the floor. Cole let the bag settle. You heard? Bryson said. Warren told me, Cole said. Bryson nodded. He had his hands in his wraps, no gloves yet, and he stood with his weight level in a way that was different from how he used to stand in front of Cole. Less performance in it, less negotiation. I want to ask you something, Bryson said. Cole waited. The coaching slots, Bryson said. The Wednesday and Friday mornings Warren's been trying to fill. He paused. Did he offer them to you? He mentioned it, Cole said. Are you going to take them? Cole looked at him. Why? Because I'll be there, Bryson said. Every Wednesday and Friday, 8 a.m. He paused. I'm not asking you to do me a favor. I'm asking because I think... He stopped, tried again. I think I've been doing this wrong for a long time and I want to do it right. And I don't know what right looks like yet, but I know what it doesn't look like. He paused. It doesn't look like what I was doing in here 6 weeks ago. Cole looked at him for a moment. You've got a shoulder tell on your right hand, Cole said, and you drop your back heel when you commit to the body shot. And your defense after the combination is muscle memory, not thinking, which works until someone who can read muscle memory shows up. Bryson absorbed this. I know, he said. I know, and I didn't know at the same time. The knowing at the same time part, Cole said. That's where the work happens. Bryson nodded slowly. So you'll take the slots, he said. Cole reached for his gloves. I'll think about it, he said, which both of them understood was different from what he'd said to Warren a week ago, which had been, let me think about it. The same words, but arriving from a different place, carrying different weight. Bryson went back to his bag. Cole went back to his work. He told Warren on Thursday. Not in the office, not with ceremony. He came in at 6:15, signed in, and stopped at the desk where Warren was sorting through the membership renewals with the reading glasses he'd recently started wearing and still seemed mildly affronted by. Wednesday and Friday, Cole said. 8 to 10. I'll take them through the end of the quarter and we see how it runs. Warren looked at him over the glasses. All right, he said. No title on the board, Cole said. Session instructor, Warren said. That's all. Okay. Okay, Warren said. He looked back down at the renewals, then, without looking up, she's going to be proud of you when she's old enough to understand what she's watching. He meant Lucy. The she was clear without naming it. Cole stood at the desk for a moment. She's already proud, he said. She has no idea why. She just is. Warren didn't say anything to that. He took his glasses off and cleaned them on his shirt, which gave him something to do with his hands, and Cole went to his corner and started rapping. The first Wednesday session had 7 people. Cole arrived at 7:55 and unlocked the floor with the maintenance key and turned the lights on and stood in the empty space for a moment in the particular silence of an empty gym in the morning, which was a different silence than the evening silence. Cleaner, less loaded with the residue of effort and ego, more like a room waiting to be told what it was today. He moved 3 of the heavy bags to the perimeter to open the center mat. He checked the bracket on the south wall. Solid, the new hardware holding exactly as it should. He checked the speed bags. He found a split in the vinyl at the edge of the blue mat near the east wall that he hadn't noticed before, ran his thumb along it, judged it non-urgent, but noted it for Saturday maintenance. By 8:05, 6 people had arrived. Bryson was first at 7:58, which Cole noted without comment. He came in and changed without talking and stretched in the corner with his headphones in, which was how he managed his own nerves. Cole had figured out. The headphones were wall between him and the social expectation of performing being okay when he wasn't entirely sure yet. What okay felt like in a room where he'd spent 2 years being the wrong version of himself. Marcus came at 8:02. Gary at 8:06, slightly breathless from the stairs, with the look of a man who had set 3 alarms and still nearly been late. Tess, the welterweight who competed, at 8:08, already wrapped, efficient in the way competitive fighters are in the morning because they've trained themselves to be operational before their preferences have time to weigh in. 2 people. Cole didn't know well. A woman in her late 20s named Carla, who'd been a member for 3 months, and who trained with a specific seriousness that told him she had reasons for being here that she hadn't shared with anyone, and a man named Pete who was 44 and had told Warren he was trying to get his weight down after a year of not moving enough, and who stood near the door with the self-consciousness of someone who suspected they might be in the wrong room. Cole looked at the 7 of them. He didn't make a speech. He didn't introduce himself. They all knew who he was, and the ones who didn't had learned it from the ones who did, because that was how gyms worked. We're going to work movement today, he said. Not combinations, not power, movement. Specifically, how you get to where you need to be before you decide to be there. He paused. Pete, come up here. Pete looked like a man who had just been asked to do something in front of the class in elementary school. He came forward. Stand here, Cole said, positioning him. I'm going to walk toward you. I want you to move so that I can't walk through you. That's all. Just don't be where I'm walking. Pete nodded. Cole walked toward him. Pete moved, sideways, a big scrambling step, effective but costing 3 times the energy it needed to. Okay, Cole said. You got out of the way. How tired did that feel? A little, Pete said. Do it 50 times and tell me. Cole looked at the room. The goal is to move the minimum distance necessary, not more. The energy you waste moving extra distance is energy you don't have when you need it. He positioned himself again. We're going to do this in pairs, 20 minutes, just this, nothing else. The room got to work. It looked simple from the outside. People walking toward each other, stepping, resetting. No contact, no combinations, nothing cinematic. To anyone watching without context, it might have seemed like a warm-up drill, something preliminary to the real training. Cole moved through the pairs, watching, adjusting, saying very little. A hand on a shoulder to redirect a step, a word about where the weight was sitting. Earlier, move, earlier, you're reacting, I want you reading. He worked Pete for 3 full minutes, walking at him from different angles, varying the pace, not trying to trick him, but not making it easy either. And by the end of it, Pete was moving with a fraction of the energy he'd started with, and with a look on his face of someone who had just understood that a physical problem they thought required strength actually required attention. Bryson was paired with Marcus. Cole watched them from across the mat. Bryson was going easy. Noticeably, deliberately easy. Not in the way he used to go easy, which was the condescension of someone protecting their own image, but in the way you go easy when you actually want the other person to learn something, when their understanding of the drill is more important than your demonstration of capability. He was calling out Marcus's drift before it happened. Left, go left. Like he could see 1 step ahead, which after 6 weeks of watching Cole, he was beginning to actually be able to do. Marcus moved left, cleanly, reset, grinned. There, Bryson said. Just that. No performance in it. Cole watched this and kept moving through the pairs and didn't say anything about it. After the session, when the floor had cleared and the last members had gone down the stairs, Bryson stayed to help Cole move the bags back. They worked without talking for a few minutes, the familiar sound of the chains and the creak of the brackets filling the room. Can I ask you something? Bryson said. You keep asking that, Cole said, and then asking anyway. The corner of Bryson's mouth moved. Fair, he said. He pushed a bag into position. The men you served with, did they know? About you. What you could do? Cole straightened, looked at the bag's hang, made a small adjustment. We all knew about each other, he said. That's different from knowing in here. He put his hand on his chest briefly. You can know a man's record, his training, his scores, and still not know the thing that's actually inside him until you're in a place where it has to come out. And when it came out? Cole looked at him. Sometimes it was enough, he said. Sometimes it wasn't. The simple, terrible weight of that landed in the room. Bryson pushed the last bag into position. The chain settled. I'm sorry, Bryson said. For what happened to, He stopped.
I don't know the details. You don't need to know the details, Cole said. His voice wasn't sharp, just clear. And you don't need to be sorry for things that happened before you knew me. Bryson nodded. The guys who weren't enough, Bryson said quietly. You carry that. It wasn't a question. Cole picked up the bag straps, coiled them. Yeah, he said. Just that. He set the straps on the bench and picked up his own kit. Wednesday was good, he said. These people are coachable. Even Pete. The gear shift was deliberate, and Bryson understood it as such, and accepted it the way you accept a door being gently closed. Not shut in your face, just closed. The conversation had gone as far as it was going to go today, and there was more value in the Wednesday session being good than in either of them standing in an empty gym extracting meaning from a conversation that didn't need to go further. Pete moved better by the end, Bryson said. He moved smarter, Cole said. That's different. He zipped his bag. Friday, he said. Friday, Bryson said. Cole went down the stairs. Bryson heard the door below, then the parking lot, then nothing. He stood in the empty gym for a moment and looked at the bags and the cracked mirror and the south wall bracket and the worn blue mats. He thought about something his father had said years ago, when Bryson was 17 and had just won his first amateur tournament and come home wanting the world to know. Gerald Kane, standing in the kitchen in his work boots, hands still rough from the day, looking at the trophy with genuine pleasure, and then looking at Bryson and saying, "Winning matters less than what you do with it."
17-year-old Bryson had taken that as a failure of enthusiasm on his father's part. He understood it now. He turned the lights off and went down the stairs. 8 weeks after the first Wednesday session, Warren changed the board. Not dramatically. He didn't add a title or build a frame around it. He just added 2 slots to the weekly schedule on the whiteboard by the office door in his cramped handwriting, WEDFRI 810M. C. Maddox. No job title, just the name and the time. 3 people added themselves to the Wednesday list the day the change appeared. 2 more by Friday. The Thursday evening class, which Cole had been running for 2 months, had 12 regular attendees and a waiting list of 5, which had never happened in the history of Stone Harbor Fight Club for any session, which Warren mentioned to Cole, and which Cole received with the expression of a man being told something about a different person. The gym had changed in ways that were difficult to point to specifically. The newer members didn't brace when the door opened. Gary had competed in his first amateur bracket. He'd lost, clearly and without shame, and come back the following Tuesday and started working on the thing that had beaten him, which Warren said was the most important possible outcome. Marcus was competing in 3 weeks, and Bryson was working his corner, which had been nobody's prediction 2 months ago. Bryson had changed in ways that were equally difficult to point to. He was still the loudest person in the room sometimes. Old habits had long roots, but the loudness had changed its purpose. It was occasionally funny now, occasionally self-deprecating, the humor of someone who had started to understand the difference between being seen and being watched. He still had the shoulder tell on the right hand, though it had gotten smaller over 8 weeks of specific attention. He still dropped the back heel on the body shot, though Cole had found the underlying hip mechanics that were causing it, and they were working on that. He wasn't fixed. Cole had no interest in fixed. Fixed implied a final state, and final states were for people who had stopped encountering things that required adaptation. He was better than he'd been. He knew more than he'd known. He was willing to be wrong in front of people, which was the prerequisite for everything else. That was enough. On a Wednesday morning in what had become late autumn, Cole arrived at 7:55 and found a car he didn't recognize in the lot. He registered it the way he registered everything, cataloged it, filed the make and color and plate partial, noted that it had been there long enough for the engine to be cold. He went up the stairs and through the door, and Warren was in his office, early, with the desk lamp on against the gray morning light. With him was a man Cole had never seen. Late 50s, trim, wearing clothes that were casual, but not quite civilian in the way certain clothes aren't quite civilian, the way the posture underneath them isn't quite civilian. He was sitting in the chair across from Warren's desk with a coffee cup and an expression of patient waiting that had the specific quality of someone who was very comfortable waiting for things. Warren looked up when Cole came through. "Cole," he said, "this is Ed Ferris. He wanted to meet you." Cole stopped in the doorway. He looked at Ed Ferris, and Ed Ferris looked at him, and the 2-second exchange contained more information than a 10-minute conversation would have. Ed Ferris said, "Chief?" The word landed in the room with a weight that told Cole everything about where this was going before it went anywhere. Cole came into the office, didn't sit, stood with his kit bag at his side. "I don't use that," Cole said, flat, not hostile. "No," Ferris said. "I know you don't." He glanced at Warren. "Can we use your office for about 10 minutes? Warren stood without being asked twice. He picked up his coffee and went out and closed the door behind him. Cole looked at Ferris. "Who sent you?" he said. "Nobody sent me," Ferris said. "I'm retired. I'm passing through Stone Harbor on my way to something else, and I heard you were here." A pause. "Roy Castillo." Cole absorbed this. "Roy talks too much," he said. "Roy talks exactly the right amount," Ferris said. "He called me because he was worried about you." "I'm fine." "I can see that," Ferris said. "That's not what he was worried about." He set his coffee down on Warren's desk. "He was worried that some people were pushing on you, and you might have to make choices you didn't want to make. He wanted someone who knew you to be in the area in case." "I didn't need anyone in the area," Cole said. "No," Ferris said. "You didn't." Silence. Cole put his kit bag on the floor. Not because he was relaxing, because the bag was getting heavy, and there was no point making a statement with his arms. "Ferris," Cole said. What do you actually want? Ferris looked at him with the direct expression of a man who had spent decades dealing in precise information and had no patience for the social rituals that preceded it. I wanted to see you, he said. That's the whole thing. I wanted to see what you'd built. He looked around the office, at the whiteboard visible through the office window with C. Maddox in Warren's handwriting, at the gym beyond it, at the morning light coming through the high windows. Roy said you were teaching. Coaching, Cole said. Sort of. What's the distinction? Teachers give you information, Cole said. Coaches put you in situations where you figure it out. A pause. I put people in situations. Ferris nodded slowly. Good distinction, he said. Cole looked at him. How's the shoulder? Ferris said. And Cole went still for a moment that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. Ferris was one of 4 living people who knew about the shoulder, the left one, the one that had required reconstruction in 2012 after an incident that hadn't made it into Cole's service record in any form recognizable as such, that lived in the dark part of his 8 years. The shoulder that on cold mornings was the first thing that reminded him of everything he'd put down. Fine, Cole said. Cold mornings. Yeah, Ferris said. Mine too. He tapped his right knee, which was a different story with the same authorship. They sat in that for a moment. 2 men who carried the evidence of a category of experience that had no social language and therefore mostly went unspoken, and who had found briefly a space where the evidence could be acknowledged without requiring explanation. I'm not going back, Cole said, not defensively, as a statement of fact. Nobody's asking you to, Ferris said. Good. I mean it, Cole. That's not why I'm here. Ferris looked at him. I'm here because Roy was worried, and because I was 3 hours away, and because I wanted to see that you were... He stopped. Seemed to edit something. I wanted to see what the life looked like. Cole was quiet for a moment. It looks like a gym, Cole said, and a kid's science project about soil composition. Ferris looked at him. Something moved through his face. Not pity. The man wasn't capable of pity in the condescending sense. More like recognition, and underneath the recognition, something Cole couldn't easily categorize, something that looked, briefly and honestly, like envy. How old? Ferris said. 9, Cole said. She's 9. Ferris nodded. He picked up his coffee, finished it, set the empty cup down. I won't stay, he said. I just wanted to see. You've seen, Cole said. Ferris stood. He was about Cole's height, maybe a 1/4 inch shorter, and he moved with the particular economy of someone who had trained the waste out of himself over decades and couldn't put it back if he tried. He put his hand out. Cole shook it. I heard about the maintenance work, Ferris said. The mats, the equipment. Part of the arrangement, Cole said. I know what it's part of, Ferris said. His grip tightened fractionally and released. Take care of that kid. That's the job, Cole said. Ferris nodded. He went out the door. Cole heard him say something brief to Warren, heard Warren's response, heard the stairs, then the door below. Then nothing. Warren came back in. He looked at Cole. You know him, Warren said. Yeah, Cole said. Yeah, Cole said. Warren considered pushing on it and decided against it, which was the right call. Session starts in 20 minutes, he said. I know, Cole said. He picked up his kit bag, went out to the floor. He moved 2 bags. Checked the south wall bracket. Found the split in the vinyl near the east wall had gotten marginally worse and made a mental note to bring the repair kit Thursday. He stood in the center of the mat and looked at the room. The cracked mirror. The whiteboard. The high windows and the gray light and the smell of rubber and years of effort. He thought about Ferris's face when he'd said 9, that brief and honest thing that had passed through it. He thought about Lucy at Mrs. Pereira's table, doing long division by lamplight, looking at the clock. He thought about Sarah, about the 14 months, about the morning he'd sat in a hospital parking lot in his truck for 40 minutes because he couldn't find a way to get out of the vehicle and walk back into that building and continue the conversation with a reality that was not going to change no matter how many times he walked into it. He thought about all of it, briefly and without flinching. The way you think about something you've learned to carry rather than something that still has the ability to knock you down. And then he set it aside. The door at the top of the stairs opened. Pete came through first, slightly breathless. Improvement from being slightly more breathless 3 weeks ago. Then Carla. Then 2 of the newer Wednesday regulars. Then Bryson, On time, headphones in, already rapping. Marcus came last, and he had someone with him, a young woman, maybe 19, who stood at the door with the look of someone not sure they were in the right place. "This is Jordan," Marcus said to Cole. "She wants to train." Cole looked at Jordan. She had the particular posture of someone who had decided to be somewhere and was now slightly regretting the decision and was refusing to show it. "You ever trained before?" he said. "No," she said. "Okay," he said. He gestured at the bench along the wall. "Watch the first 20 minutes, then you'll know what we're doing." She sat. She watched. Cole called the session, and for 2 hours the gym did what a gym is supposed to do. Not make anyone impressive, not produce proof of superiority, but build something in the space between who a person was when they walked in and who they were capable of becoming, one session at a time, without anyone asking to be witnessed. Cole left at 10:05. He drove home through the mid-morning streets, which had a different quality than evening streets. Less crowded, but less anonymous. People with visible purposes. The texture of ordinary life doing its ordinary thing. He stopped at the grocery store on Clement Street. He needed eggs, and he was nearly out of the coffee Lucy had decided she liked the smell of and didn't drink, but wanted in the house, which he'd started buying 2 months ago without discussion. He walked the aisles with the particular economy of a man who knew what he needed and wasn't interested in the things he didn't. At the register, the woman asked if he'd found everything okay. "Yes," he said. She told him the total, and he paid it, and she gave him his change and said, "Have a good one," and he said, "You too." And the whole transaction was unremarkable and quiet and complete. He drove home. He put the groceries away. He made coffee. He stood at the window above the sink with the mug in his hand and looked at the yard, which had a rake in it that he kept meaning to use on the leaves piling against the back fence. The same rake that had been leaning against the same fence post since the second week of October. He would do the leaves Saturday. He made a note of it. He drank his coffee. At 2:15, he picked Lucy up from school. She came out the front doors with her backpack and her jacket and the expression she always had at the end of a school day. The compressed energy of a person who had been sitting still for 6 hours and was just now being permitted to exist at full volume again. She hit the truck door and got in and dropped her bag and immediately began. "So there's a thing about the science fair and Mrs. Holly said we could partner up or go solo, and I want to go solo, but Priya said we should partner, and I don't know because Priya is good at the poster part, but I'm better at the actual science part, and I don't know if—" "What's your topic?" Cole said. "Water filtration," she said, "like different materials and how well they filter things." "That's a good topic," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I want to do it alone." He pulled into traffic. The afternoon was overcast, the light flat and even and characterless in the way November afternoons got. "What does Priya want to do?" he said. "Something with plants," Lucy said, "but she'd probably do the water thing if I asked." Would the project be better with her? Lucy was quiet for a moment. The question had required actual consideration, which he'd intended. "The poster would be better," she said finally. "Priya's poster would be much better." "And the science part?" "I'd do the science part either way," she said. "So the project would be better," he said. She looked at the window. "That's annoying," she said. "Yeah," he said. She was quiet for a mile. "Is it giving up if you let someone help with the part you're bad at?" she said. "No," he said. "It's resource management." She turned to look at him. "That's a weird way to say it," she said. "It's the right way," he said. She thought about this for the remaining 2 miles home, and he let her think. And when they pulled into the driveway, she got out and picked up her bag and stood on the front walk for a moment. "I'm going to ask Priya," she said. "Okay," he said. She went inside. He sat in the truck for a moment. The yard. The rake still leaning against the fence. The ordinary Saturday he'd make of doing the leaves, Lucy probably helping for the first 20 minutes before finding something more interesting. The bag of leaves at the curb by afternoon. The evening, something simple from the fridge. The lamp at the kitchen table, long division or science fair prep or whatever the current thing was. The Wednesday session, the Friday session, the Thursday evening class, the bracket in the south wall that held, the split in the vinyl that needed fixing. Warren's cramped handwriting on the whiteboard. See Maddox. The Tuesday nights when he wrapped his hands and found his corner and let the bag tell him what he still had. Ferris's face when he'd said 9. He got out of the truck. He went inside. Lucy was at the kitchen table with her notebook open, already writing something. The project outline, maybe, or a text to Priya, or something else entirely, the internal logic of her afternoon not requiring his input. The lamp was on. The house had the smell of the morning's coffee still faintly in it. He hung up his jacket. He sat down across from her. "What are you writing?" he said. "Everything I know about water filtration," she said, without looking up. "So Priya can't do it wrong." "She might know some things you don't," he said. Lucy considered this with the expression of someone entertaining a possibility they find genuinely unlikely. "Maybe," she said. He got up, put the kettle on, stood at the counter while it heated and watched his daughter write in her notebook with the same focused intensity her mother had brought to everything she'd ever considered worth doing, the same tilt of the head, the same slight compression of the lips when she was getting a thought down before it shifted. The kettle started to sing, to Manmarati. He sat back down. Outside, the afternoon was going gray toward evening, the light softening toward the hour, when the street lamps would come on and the neighborhood would settle into itself. Somewhere down the street, a dog was doing something about something, ordinary sounds. The texture of a life that was not exceptional from the outside and was everything from the inside. Cole Maddox drank his tea. He watched his daughter figure out what she knew. He didn't need the world to understand what he'd built here. He didn't need a room to know what he was. He had spent 8 years being necessary in ways that left no record, and then he had spent years being necessary in a way that had only one audience, and the audience was 9 years old and had her mother's eyes and was currently explaining water filtration to a notebook with total conviction. That was enough. That was, without qualification or comparison, enough. Stone Harbor Fight Club would open again Thursday at 6. The bags would swing on their chains, the mat would creak underfoot, somebody would wrap their hands wrong, and Cole would fix it with 2 words, and they would feel it click into place and not entirely know why. Bryson Kane would come in and work the thing he'd been working on, the heel on the body shot, and one Thursday it would be there, the correction, arriving not as a decision but as instinct, the way real learning arrives, and he'd look up and Cole would see him understand that it had happened. Marcus would compete and lose again, probably, and then come back, definitely, because he was the kind of person who came back, and that was already the most important thing he'd ever learned from any gym. Pete would move earlier than he used to. Carla would find what she was training toward, whatever it was, in her own time. Jordan, who'd watched from the bench on Wednesday morning with her arms crossed and her chin slightly up, would come back for the Friday session. Cole was nearly certain of this, and would be bad at it and keep going. Warren would drink bad coffee in his office and look out through the glass at a room that had changed in ways he was still cataloging, and occasionally he would write something on a notepad that he didn't share with anyone, and eventually he would be satisfied. And on the mornings when Cole came in early, before anyone else, before the lights were fully warmed and the room still held the particular cold of a space that had been closed overnight, he would stand at the center of the mat and feel the floor under his feet, solid, familiar, imperfect, holding, and he would know exactly where he was. Here, present, enough. The most powerful thing a person can do isn't prove what they're capable of. It's choose every day what that capability is for.